Hello, everyone. And my name is Kirstyn, and I am so happy to be here with you today. I am just going to check out and make sure that we are a go and that audio is good and it looks like things are happening in our Facebook group. Okay. So I hope you all are doing well. Lots of stuff going on today, right? We have the solstice. So it's the longest day of the year for, daylight is abundant today. And we also have a solar eclipse happening tomorrow. So that is also very interesting. Yay. Okay, it looks like we're live. There's my voice. Okay. So cool. I'm gonna keep my eye on this as well. So if you see me looking down, I'm looking at your questions as they come in. Feel free to drop the questions. I am, however, just going to talk a little bit about writing task number 2, okay, before I look at your questions and answer those, okay? But feel free to ask me really about any section of the TOEFL that you want to. Or really about life in general. I'm also taking those questions because there's a lot going on in the world right now. And I want to take this moment to honor you and salute you for, going on this journey of the TOEFL. It is challenging. It is sometimes really frustrating, and especially now with everything that's happening in the world and some test centers not being available for everyone to take the exam, it is just added pressure, and you could feel like your life is on hold right now. So I just want to take a moment to honor you wherever you're at in this TOEFL journey, and really give you all the encouragement and support. You're doing it. It might not seem like you're making progress. You are, I promise. And, just showing up today and listening into these tips in this video and, studying as you do you're doing it, okay? You're doing great. Okay, so let me first start a little talk about writing task number 2. I just want to preface this with, I just finished a writing task 2 course with some students. And one of the things that came up in our course was what happens when there's a more difficult, when there's a more challenging TOEFL question. So what I mean by that is we're very used to looking at questions that say something like, some people prefer outdoor activities. Other people prefer to stay indoors. Which do you prefer and why? And when we did those kinds of questions, all the students in my class found it really, quite easy. They had an easy time writing. It was pretty simple. But as soon as the question shifted a little bit, maybe got a little bit more sophisticated, just a little bit more complex, it was like, people freaked out. It was like, oh, deer in headlight situation, freak out, and they didn't know what to do. And my answer to that was, when you encounter this question, you're going to do the exact same thing that you do with outside, inside, right? You have to take a side and support your argument. So there's no need to freak out. Sometimes the question might look a little longer. I know TOEFL is like this. Sometimes certain sections are hard, sometimes they're easy, sometimes they're hard, sometimes they're easy, and TOEFL shifts. So, lately it looks like there's been a trend with writing task 2 being fairly on the simple side. But, last year, several months ago, there was a trend where writing task number 2 question was a little bit lengthier, a little bit more complex. So I want to prepare you or just, show you how you can approach a question that may be a little bit more complex, okay? And I'll start with an example. It's one that I saw a couple years ago circulating on the test. And I just want to show you how I do it. And I'm just checking in. You're amazing. You're amazing. Encouragement. Yay. Okay, good. Okay. Fantastic. Yeah. If you have any questions that come up, just put them in the feed. I will look at them, but first I'm just going to focus on writing task number 2, okay? And then I'll return to your questions. So let me share my screen with you here. And I'll read this writing task number 2 question. And I say writing task number 2, you'll hear independent essay. It's the same thing, right? So here's our question. There are many manufacturing companies today that continue to pollute our environment. Some people think that slapping monetary fines or penalties to companies are the only way to stop them from polluting. Others say there are better methods to combat this issue. Which view do you support and why? Give reasons and examples to support your answer. Okay, so at first this might be very scary because, oh my gosh, there's so many sentences. Why are there so many sentences? So just when you see a question like this, break it down step by step, okay? So you'll notice that the first sentence is just setting up the situation, right? There are companies and they are polluting, okay? So then you see the next part. It says, some people think. Some people think. So I'm going to highlight that. And I know that that's one opinion. That's one argument. Okay. And so what's the argument? Slapping monetary fines or penalties to companies are the only way to stop them. Okay. Now, others say, now I know that I'm being introduced to this second side, this other viewpoint. So I'm gonna, just in my mind, I'm gonna separate those two. All right, so others say, okay, what do they say? There are better methods to combat this issue being pollution or companies polluting. And then here's our TOEFL question right here, right? Which view do you support and why? Okay, so really I have a choice. And the choice is I either write an essay that says, yes, monetary fines or penalties are the only way to stop companies from polluting, and here's why. Or I can say, well, there are other methods that are better than monetary fines to stop companies from polluting, okay? So I have to make a decision. Now, when I wrote this essay, I made the decision that monetary fines and penalties were the only way to stop companies from polluting. One of the reasons I went with that, and you have to determine this for yourself, is can I think of ideas to support that side? Which side is the easiest one for me to support? Which side do the ideas just come really, quickly and easily, or the examples come quickly and easily? So you have to choose, because you only have 30 minutes to write this essay, right? Don't choose something that's hard to argue. Choose the easier path. It would be a different story if you had a week to write this essay, but you have 30 minutes, right? So you have to get the job done. Now, what I always recommend is you want to make a plan first. Okay, a lot of students want to just start typing right away because they're under the time pressure and they want to start, okay, I have to write this essay right now. I only have 30 minutes. Take a moment, don't start typing your introduction yet. Use your pencil and your paper that they'll give you at the test center, or if you're taking the home version, right? And write down some notes about how you're going to argue your point, okay? So for me, I've already decided, and I'm gonna write this down, that monetary fines, this is my plan, and penalties are the only way to get companies to stop polluting, okay? So I wanna have that at the forefront in my mind, okay? Now, and I'm just gonna I'm gonna get rid of this for now because I chose this side, so I'll get that out of our way. Now, the next thing I wanna do is I wanna come up with 2 reasons why monetary fines and penalties are the only way. Okay, so in my mind, I think this is an easy trick, but I'll write down what goes on in my mind. Okay, but in my mind, it looks like this: monetary, and I'm gonna kind of combine the two just to be shorter. Monetary penalties are the only way, and again, I'm not writing full sentences because I'm just, this is in my notes, okay, that I'm writing on my paper before I type. Only way to stop companies from polluting because, okay, I'm gonna think of my reason why. And one thing that I thought of is that companies usually only take action when their profits are affected in a negative way, in this sense, right? So I'll say negatively. Okay, so companies usually only take action when their profits are affected negatively. Now, I have to come up with an example that's going to support this. So in my plan, when I write this essay, I definitely want an example that shows how this works. Like, well, Kirstyn, tell me about a company that won't stop polluting and that will only take action when they are fined, when there's a monetary penalty. So the example that I thought of for this situation, actually, it came from a movie that I had seen. The movie's name is Erin Brockovich. It's kind of an older movie for you guys who are way younger than me. But it's a really great movie if you haven't seen it, and it stars Julia Roberts, and she plays Erin Brockovich. And what happens is she ends up working for a law firm, and she discovers that this company called PG&E, they are knowingly polluting the area. And this is causing cancer in a lot of the people who are living near this company, this manufacturing plant. So they were just dumping toxic chemicals, right? Now, this company knew what they were doing was wrong. They knew what they were doing was polluting people and that it was toxic, but they kept on doing it. Why? Because it was profitable for them. The only way this company was stopped is because all of these people eventually filed a lawsuit, and lawsuit. So basically, this company was affected monetarily. They had to pay out this huge sum of money to these people who got very, very sick because of their irresponsible pollution. It was the only way this company stopped doing what they were doing and changed their actions. So that was my first supporting paragraph. Okay, that's idea number 1. Okay, but now I need idea number 2. Okay, so again, I'm gonna do the same technique I did right here, which is, okay, well, monetary penalties are also the only way. Monetary penalties. And again, penalties could be a punishment in any sort of way. It doesn't have to be, making the company pay money. However, in my mind, I just went with the money example because that was clearer or easier for me, right? You always, when you're the writer of the essay, you control the content. You decide, okay, what's, you still have to answer the question, of course, but if it's hard for you to think of, okay, what's a penalty, punishment, what could be another punishment, for me, it was easier for me to think of just monetary fines, having the company pay out some sort of money, because again, the only way they understand things sometimes is through money. If they're affected monetarily, they start to change their ways. So that was my first point. But also, I have to think of another reason. So I'm going to come back to monetary penalties are a good idea to enforce because, and again, I'm not going to write the whole sentence, I'm just taking notes here, right? So monetary penalties are great to enforce for companies who pollute and to get them to stop polluting, because my point here was more, my idea was fines or monetary fines are clear and enforceable, meaning they can be enforced and there's a clear sum of money that must be paid, and either you pay it or you don't. Okay. Now I have to come up with an example. So here, what I did was I went to the other side. Like, let's say there's a scenario where a company has to, let's say they caused some damage to a forest, right? Damaged trees or a wooded area, forest. And now let's say that the company wants to do good and prevent pollution. So the company is going to plant trees. Okay, so this seems like a good idea, but but how many trees will the company actually plant? It's very hard to check and enforce and regulate, right, the environmental good that the company might be doing. Another way, yeah, so it's hard, I'll put hard to regulate, how many trees, if it was an appropriate number of trees, in order for there to be, environmental, let's say, a positive, in order for there to be a positive environmental impact, or a kind of buffer to pollution, right? Because trees, they absorb carbon dioxide, so they can act as a great buffer to carbon dioxide emission because they love to eat up carbon dioxide, right? However, it's very hard to enforce exactly, how many trees would need to be planted in order to buffer this certain amount of carbon dioxide emitted by a factory, for example. Whereas if that company, right, if that company is faced with monetary fines, that's an exact amount right, an exact and precise amount of money, they're going to be able to see their profits, their losses, and what could happen to their company if they do not follow certain environmental regulations, or if they don't stop themselves from polluting. Okay. Now, can you argue the other side? Of course you can argue the other side, right? This was just my essay, so I'm just giving you what I did. And again, making the plan first, even if it takes you, I would say, between 3 and 4 minutes is ideal to make your plan, and then start typing. However, let's say it takes you 5 minutes on this question because it was more complex, or it was more challenging to think of an example. Then yes, take 5 minutes, take 6 minutes to make your plan, because I can always tell, and I'm going to stop my share here. I can always tell when students do not make a plan first. It usually, maybe first paragraph looking good, intro looking good, supporting paragraph looking good, and then about halfway through the essay is a kind of repetition of previous ideas, or they go off in a different direction and they lose the question. They lose the focus of the question. So it's really important that you answer the question for yourself first, right? Choose your side, especially when you have this. Some people think this, other people think this. It's asking you to choose one of those, right? And then come up with, okay, this is the best option because. Whatever comes after that because, that's your idea number one. That's your topic sentence for your supporting paragraph number one. And then do the same for idea number two, topic sentence for supporting paragraph number two. Some ideas that we came up with in class, I'll give you an example of the other side, right? Maybe it is better to not have monetary penalties for these companies, and there are better methods to encourage the stop of pollution. Now, in this case, if you argue this side, now you have to come up with the better methods, right? So you have to be a little on the creative side here. What would be the better method besides paying a fine? So perhaps companies should be encouraged to attend educational awareness programs about pollution prevention. And perhaps, they learn about, and here's my example, right? Maybe they learn more about recycling. Maybe they learn more about how to dispose of hazardous materials. Maybe, they are given lots of documentaries to watch all about how pollution is so harmful. So you do it through education rather than a monetary fine. Maybe second idea, right? Second a thought of what would be a better method. Maybe it's having certain regulations in place that prevent companies from building their factories close to where people live. Maybe there's a regulation in place that has them build their facilities in a lot of green areas, right? We talked about those trees absorbing the carbon dioxide, and having buffers, like green area buffers around this facility. And that wouldn't be a monetary penalty or punishment. It's just already a regulation in place to prevent pollution from happening in the first place. So that maybe that's my idea number two, right? But in that situation, you do have to get creative and come up with the better method. Okay, well, if we're not gonna find them, what would be the better method? And then it's your turn to really think that through. All right, so that's my little tip. In short, if you have a kind of longer type writing task number 2 question, don't freak out. Just break it down into smaller steps. Find out, okay, this is one argument, this is the other. Which side am I on? And choose the path, we call it in English, the path of least resistance, the path that's easiest for you to answer in that short amount of time. Okay, so I'm going to take a look. I know you've been typing some questions in the feed, so I'm going to look at those questions now, and I just open up the floor to anything that you might want to talk about. And okay, so yeah. Oh, Marcella's here. Hey, Marcella. I understood monetary fines or penalties as synonyms. Yeah. So, and this is something in TOEFL that's a little bit challenging, right? If you get something when you're presented with one of these more, let's say, challenging questions, and there's a vocabulary word that you're not sure about, this can be troublesome because if it's really important to answering the question and you don't know what the word means, you just have to try your best. I would say in this particular situation, just taking one, that's what helped me, is just taking the one. Okay, I'm just going to focus on monetary fines. But yeah, they are a little bit different because monetary is just talking about money, but penalty is a kind of punishment, right? So it's kind of like if you do something illegal as a human being, right, you might be ticketed or fined. Let's say I just drove through a red light or something. The police officer might stop me and give me a ticket, and I have to pay $200 or something. But there are other penalties, right? Like I don't know, what do I do? I walk into a store and steal some stuff, and the police officer comes along and says, "You're going to jail." Okay, so the jail sentence would be a penalty. That's not necessarily a monetary penalty, right? It's physical imprisonment. So yeah, the terms are slightly different there. Okay. So I have problems to support my answers. Okay. I think with this is you want to think of something that makes sense for you, and of course, certain topics are just going to be a little bit easier. If we go back to the very easy outside inside situation, which do you prefer? Do you like to do activities outside, or do you like to stay inside? It's a little bit easier to think of examples for that, right? Because you just think about your own life. Oh, I enjoy the outdoors because this reason, that reason. And then, when you think of your examples, this is really where your essay comes alive. This should be the fun part of your essay, especially if you're doing, personal examples for yourself. Or thinking about a friend or family member, something that you have experience with. Now, the other thing to keep in mind with the examples, the more specific you get, the better. Okay, the more specific you get. So, don't just tell me about, well, I like running. One activity I do outside. I like the outside. Well, we have to think of a reason first, right? Outside activities are best because they encourage physical exercise. Okay, great. So now you're going to get ready to tell me all about the physical exercise. So tell me, well, what specifically do you do? Oh, well, I run. Okay, well, what's so great about running? Because I don't like running. hate running, okay? You'll never see me running. Unless there's a bear chasing me, then I'll start running. But typically every day I'm not going to run. That's not my favorite form of exercise, but it might be yours. So you have to pretend that the reader or TOEFL grader that you're writing to is not aware of much of anything. So you have to convince me that running is amazing. When I run, I work up a sweat, which releases all these toxins from my body. And I also get this amazing energetic uplift. I get adrenaline going through my body, and I get endorphins released during the physical movement of my body through space. And when I'm done with the run and I get home, I wipe the sweat off my head and I take a cold shower and I feel so much better. I feel like a new person. Oh, now I understand why running is so amazing. Okay. So it's really about getting specific and not being afraid to get creative, to bring in your experience into these examples. Now, of course, the example I just showed, right, there wasn't a whole lot of personal experience that I brought into my example, but I used my observations from life. You know, my general observation so far of a lot of big companies is they just care about money. That's the thing that they understand. Now, all companies are like this, certainly not. But the companies that I've previously seen and or worked for have only taken action, have only understood something when it came to money. So that's through my observation and experience. And then I brought in the example of the from the movie that I watched, right? The PG and E example. And also, you know, don't be afraid to get a little creative. If it's something that you don't have personal experience in, you can imagine some scenario around that and get specific in that example, in that scenario. Okay, so this is a great question. If I am with one side on task 2, can I give reasons why I do not support the other side as body paragraph 2? Okay, so now this is a great question, and I've seen a lot of essays do this actually. And here's where different teachers, I think, will say have a different response, okay? Here is my recommendation. And as always, with anybody's advice or recommendation, take what is useful for you, and you can disregard the rest. I am a very, very big advocate of having 2 reasons to support your one side. Okay, so in this case, your question, I would not in supporting paragraph 2 bring reasons why I don't support the other side. You can. It's not like don't do it, it's not allowed. You can. But here's why I like the approach of giving 2 reasons to support. You are basically writing an argumentative essay or persuasive essay. And in order to persuade me, I need some good reasons for your side. Okay, so it's like kind of like you want to build up your side to the best of your ability first. Okay, before you start talking about the other side and how bad it is. So it's you know, it's like anything in life. If I said, hey, come with me, you're going to say, well, why should I come with you? Oh, we're going to have so much fun. Well, why are we going to have so much fun? I'm going to take you on a roller coaster. Well, why is that roller coaster going to be a good thing? Because it's going to give you the thrill and adventure of your life. You know, it's like I have to keep building reasons why. before I can convince you. Otherwise, it's not very convincing, you know? So that's where I'm coming from. I'm coming from a place of, generally speaking in academia, kind of thinking beyond the TOEFL here, but in academia in general, when you write a thesis paper, when you write a dissertation, you are building support for for your idea. And that comes first. And then later on, you could start to talk about either the flaws of the other side or the flaws perhaps even in your own argument, which is what we call the counter argument. Okay. Now, if you're doing a GRE, GMAT essay, the counter argument is very important. It's a necessary part of your essay. You have more time to write it. You have more time for that essay. You don't have, so in 30 minutes, what I would do, what I recommend is support that argument before you talk about how the other side isn't working. Okay. But you'll notice in my essay, I kind of did something similar, right, to this. And I in my example, I said, if we do the better method of, not having fines, if we don't have monetary fines for them, then it's really hard to regulate. And I use the example of the trees, right? So it's doing that. But notice I did that example, but with the heading, with the topic sentence of why I'm supporting. So I'm supporting this monetary fine because it's clear and it's enforceable, right? And then if we didn't have the monetary fine, what would happen then? Well, it's not clear, it's not enforceable. How are we going to enforce if they're doing something wrong? Or, how can we count all the trees that are necessary to block that carbon dioxide, etc. So, so to answer your question again, I would focus on the reasons to support first, 2 reasons to support first. And then in the example, if you wanted to, like I just did, you could play with like what's going wrong if we go to the other side, but then go right back to that's why, my argument is the better choice. Okay. I hope that answers your question. Can I talk about 2 ideas in the same paragraph, although they are not so related? Well, you could have 2 examples in the same paragraph, but those 2 examples must support your topic sentence. Okay, that's the whole reason those 2 ideas are in that paragraph. So put this down. I talk with my hands a lot. So let's say I have my topic sentence here, and I have example number 1. And as you just said, yeah, you can, if you want, you can have example number 2. So maybe, outside is great because it encourages physical activity. Perfect. And now example number 1, you're running. Example number 2, you are, what else are you doing outside? Swimming in the ocean. You're swimming with the whales and the dolphins. Okay, so those 2 examples both demonstrate what, the physical activity that you're doing because you're going outside. Okay, and the benefits of that, right? But maybe another reason you would go outside is because it encourages more social interaction with others that you can't necessarily get at home, indoors. So example 1, maybe you are at a cafe, you're at a coffee shop, and you get to talk to strangers that you never would have met at home, but maybe maybe there's a love connection there. Okay. Example number 2, you are, what else are you doing outside? How about one of those, so cafes would be one of those like outdoor malls, and it encourages social interaction because now you're walking in and out of shops, and you know, talking to different store owners. And otherwise you never would have met them or talked to them while you were inside. So see, I have those two examples. They're different ideas, but they fit under that category. So whatever is in your paragraph, it must always go back to support that topic sentence, that topic idea. So I hope that answers your question. Hey, if you get one idea, perfect, because time is a factor. You got to pay attention to time. But hey, if you have time and you have two ideas and they fit under that topic sentence, wonderful. You could bring those in. Okay, you are amazing. You're amazing. I just get excited about talking about writing. Trust me, about an hour ago, I was still sleeping. I was awake, but I was asleep. Is there limitation for each part, like main idea, support ideas, examples, or the length is belong to us with how much info we can add to that? Great question. There really is no limitation other than you have 30 minutes. And for many students, that's a big limitation, right? For others, hey, if you're a fast typer and you can make a plan really fast, you can have an intro paragraph, a supporting paragraph 1, supporting paragraph 2, supporting paragraph 3, supporting paragraph 4. So there is no limitation. In fact, you know, this structure, this academic structure, even though it's really small for TOEFL, when you know how to do this structure successfully, this is how to write essays, papers, thesis, you know, material for your academic career. You know, if you were to get your PhD dissertation, guess what you need? An intro with a thesis in it, supporting paragraphs that support your argument. Okay, it's the same structure, but it's longer, right? So you're right, there is no limitation other than TOEFL requires 30 minutes and then you're done. So what I usually recommend, what I usually see students able to do successfully in those 30 minutes is short introduction, maybe 3 or 4 sentences tops, supporting paragraph 1. Now, this paragraph should have a topic sentence, which states your idea, your reason why. Then you're probably going to have another sentence that explains that topic sentence just a little bit more. What do you mean by that? You know, what do you mean by physical activity, or what do you mean by going outside? And then you're probably going to have, and then you're going to introduce example 1. So it's probably going to take you about 2 or 3, I think I wrote yesterday, probably is going to take you 3 sentences to explain your example fully, right? That's where you get specific. Well, why? Why is that good? Specific. Why? Well, why is that good? Specific. Okay. And then some sort of ending to that paragraph, the concluding sentence, a way to kind of finish it off. And then you do the same thing for supporting paragraph 2. And then usually that's when we're getting close to the time, right? Of this essay is coming to a close. That clock is ticking, and probably just 3 sentences for a conclusion, done, finished. Okay. That's usually what I see, but if you want to write more, you can. Okay, yeah, does the independent essay need a conclusion? Well, I'll tell you this. When I took, yes, it's a goal, okay? You want to reach the goal of having a conclusion. However, if you get to your conclusion and the test ends, the timing goes off and the screen stops and you're done, don't freak out, okay? Because the grader is going to realize that you were ready to write this conclusion. You just ran out of time. It's not the end of the world. So when I took the GRE, for example, you know, I'm typing away. I get to my conclusion And I think I was writing the first sentence of my concluding paragraph. And then right in the middle of that sentence, the time goes off. And I thought, oh no, I was like, okay, it didn't affect my score. Okay, so having a conclusion is a good goal to have, but also don't freak out if you're not able to get there. So I had some students in my last class that, were really time crunched, and they could only get a thesis supporting paragraph number 1 and supporting paragraph number 2 in that 30 minutes. And that is enough to get you a pretty good score. Okay, if you spend all your time on this beautiful introduction, or you spend all your time on this amazing conclusion without that middle part, that's when you're going to see your score drop, because you're missing the most essential part, which is what side are you on and how do you support that side. Okay, so focus there first rather than worry about conclusion. Let's see. Anything else? Okay, question regarding reading and listening sections. Congratulations on your 29. That's amazing. Great job. How to improve my score in these 2 sections? I usually score around 22 to 24. So first of all, congratulations. You're doing great. Reading is, reading is a tough one. So I guess I would have to know a little bit more about how you're already studying. I think a lot of students go to TPO, right, for practice. And I think that is useful to a certain extent. Okay, so if you've been doing like practice, strategies for reading, it might be time to incorporate, or maybe spend less time doing that, and then more time doing some intensive academic reading. So looking at, and I can post some links that I like to, read articles from. So I like history.com. I like scientificamerican.com, just to do some intensive reading so that you are learning new vocabulary words. You are able to summarize what it is that you're reading. And yeah, so that's one. Now, if you're already immersed in academic reading a lot, and by a lot, I mean you're reading at least maybe 1 article a day in English, then you would return to the strategy aspect, and you would say, okay, what are the questions that tend to irritate me? If you're getting 22, 24 in reading, there's probably like that one or 2 questions that really irritate you. So maybe it's the main idea summary question. Maybe it's the coherence question, where you have to place the sentence in the paragraph and make it fit and make sense. Maybe it's the paraphrase. So kind of target, like just look at your test and say, okay, well, what question is it that I'm really not getting? It usually tends to be 1 or 2 that's like a weak spot, and then really analyzing that. I have a free inference course that's available. I mention that because that's really good for strategy. So if you're struggling with like understanding, well, why am I getting this wrong? Or why am I constantly falling into this trap? I have that free course up there, and it really outlines a lot of the traps in the inference question, but they're applicable to reading. They're also applicable to the listening section, because the test makers use the same traps over and over again. So once you know the traps, then you know how to avoid the traps and how to not fall into them. So yeah, that's what I would recommend there. It's got to be kind of a balance now between intensively reading and your strategy portion. So if you're looking for strategy, I have that free inference course that's available. If you're looking for more intensive reading, I'm actually starting a new class on Monday, and I still have spots available, and it's going to be 4 weeks of intensive reading. So we're going to focus on, do I understand this paragraph? And what are ways I can increase my comprehension skills? So it's kind of deciding where I need to spend more time, and then going in that direction a little bit more. That's what I would recommend. The listening also, I would say you might want to do some listening that's not related. It's going to be related to TOEFL, but not in terms of like listening to a TOEFL lecture and answering questions. It would be, again, Scientific American has some great podcasts that are really short, but have a lot of stuff jam-packed. I would definitely recommend that. And I have some, I would definitely watch some documentaries, on your typical TOEFL topics, things like energy, things like maybe space, like astronomy topics, things like, whatever your least favorite TOEFL topic is, I guess, would be the place to access, right? I have a list of documentaries that I like to use with my class, so I can always drop those as well. Okay, common grammatical error. Wow, great question. Okay, the top ones that I see that are big ones: subject, verb, agreement. So let's say you're in writing task number 1, and I see the lecturer argue that, I need that S. The lecturer argues that, right? And this is for writing and for speaking. I hear it in both sections, okay? So watch out for subject verb agreement. While we're on the verb thing, when you're in the past, use the past tense. I know it's so simple, right? But for some reason, it's like when you're in that zone of explaining your example, whether you're writing it or whether you're speaking it in the speaking section, you'll say something like, when I was a child, I play outside. I played outside. And then sometimes the next sentence, or maybe the first sentence, will be in the past tense. Oh yeah, I'm in the past. And then all of a sudden you forgot you're in the past, and you keep on going with your story, but suddenly it's in the present tense or some other tense. So when you're in the past, use the simple past tense, typically, not past perfect. We rarely use that one. That's a little bit of a other situation. So subject verb agreement, when you're in the past, use the past tense. I'll give you one more. And it's not the one we like to hear about, but it's really important because it ties into the subject verb agreement, and that is articles. So a, an, the, or nothing. When you have a countable noun, like cup, you can have 3 cups, 10 cups, 5 cups. So you have a cup of tea, right? The tendency to forget a is high. So just look back through your countable nouns, make sure you have an a. Now, if it's a specific noun, I like to drink a cup of tea in the morning. The cup I am holding is dark blue. Okay, now I'm talking, the first instance was the first mention. It's general, countable. You can count it. So A stands for 1, right? Just remember that. But if I'm talking about a specific cup, this cup, the cup that has the University of Connecticut written on it. Now this is specific, so I'm going to use the, right? And you might be talking about, I see this a lot, the students have many idea. Well, is it just one idea, or do they have many ideas, right? Just remembering the S. So a and the nothing. If it's a countable noun, it needs the S at the end if it's more than one. Okay, so those are like the top three grammatical errors that I see. And they're usually easily fixable. So usually when students look back, they're, oh yeah, they can edit themselves. So those are the things that I would look for. When you record yourself, listen to what you say. You could even type like a transcript, like type, or they have these apps. You guys are so sophisticated. You can speak and the sentence will appear, right? It'll just transcribe automatically for you. And notice in your pronunciation, is it transcribing correctly? Do I have grammatical mistakes, as I'm speaking? Just notice how you're speaking, because I know you can catch some of these yourself. And then just practice the correct way of doing it, right? Focus on the meat. Yeah, if you were in master class, I said that was like the heart of my lesson, right? Focus on the meat. Can I prepare for the test in 20 days? I've seen students prepare in 7 days. I had a student that was in my class for 10 days and got a 114. It totally depends on you, right? Everybody's different. Everybody's at a different English level. So, yes, you can prepare in that short amount of time, but it also has a lot to do with the current level that you're at right now. Okay. Okay, this is 2 questions here about specific examples. How to connect my reasons with my specific examples. Yes, this is the key to writing. If you have reason number 1 here, your example has to show how that works. Okay, you have to show me how it works, and that's how you connect your example to your reason number 1, and how you connect the example to reason number 2. So yeah, the only way I can really, fully answer that question is if you were to give me, a piece of your writing so that I could tell you a little bit more about how to make this happen. But what I usually ask myself, I look at the question 10, maybe more than 10 times to make sure that I'm answering it. And I'll look at my topic sentence. If I'm writing supporting paragraph 1, I will look at my topic sentence 5 or 6 times. Now I'm not saying the MIS. I will look at that topic sentence a lot, so that as I'm writing my example, I'm saying, okay, how does it show what I'm trying to say? How does it show? Am I still on the right track? So continuing to refer to your idea, and then as you write your example, making sure you go from step 1, A, to B, to C. It's got to be a logical way that this example works. Okay, so I know it's not a total answer to your question, because I'd kind of have to play with what you're doing right now to help you out. But yeah, that is a great question, because that's the key to writing. That's the key to academic writing right there. What's the difference between details and examples? Okay, so examples are a kind of detail, I guess would be my answer. So let's say we're talking about reading passage for a moment, because this comes up a lot in the main idea summary question, right? And the main idea summary question usually comes at the end of the reading passage. We have a main idea summary statement, and then we have A, B, C, D, A, B, C, D, E, F answer choices, right? We've got 6 statements. And the question asks us to find main ideas. The question does not want us to focus on details. So sometimes there might be a true statement, but it was mentioned in some part of the text, but it wasn't really encompassing of the whole idea of the text. So we'd eliminate that detail. Now, a detail might be like just one mention of something, okay? But an example is there because it shows how something works, right? So that's why I said an example is one type of detail, okay? Another different type of detail might be, you know, mentioning maybe the reading is talking about population growth. And there's a detail that says the United States had a 0.01% decrease in population. Now that might not necessarily be an example of how something works, right? But it is a detail in regards to maybe this whole entire reading that's talking about world population growth, okay? So there is a slight difference in the meaning. I would say an example is one kind of detail. Okay. I brainstorm well when I do TPO, but when I'm on the test, I can't think of any good concrete ideas, examples. Yeah. Oh, I feel your pain because, yeah, something changes, right? When you're not at home, when you're not relaxed, when you're not sipping on your tea, right? It's, it is a different type of stress that is on you during the exam. So first of all, I would attempt to simulate that test experience as much as possible. So for writing, of course, you'd want to think about time, just coming up with ideas in 3 to 5 minutes. When you're in that test situation, there's a couple of things that I could advise here, because you can think of the ideas in a normal everyday, right? But it's because you're in that stress situation that it's more difficult to come up with ideas. And neurologically, that makes sense because when you are stressed out, you're not tapping into the prefrontal cortex here. This is like our center for higher thinking, for rational thought, for logic, right? What happens is when you're under stress, all the blood flow, well, not all the blood flow, but a lot of blood flow will go here to the hindbrain, back of the brain. This is fight, flight, survival mode. So you are getting ready to fight or run, or you're in a freeze. So when you're in stress, it's back here. Guess what? This back here doesn't really care about ideas. It just cares about surviving the situation. So what I'd recommend right before, because you have a little break in between each section, certainly in your 10-minute break right before speaking, I would recommend jumping up and down, you know, give your hands a little shake out, you know, maybe stretch, right? Breathe. I can do this. When you breathe, you get more oxygen flow and your nervous system comes out of that stress response and you're able to access prefrontal cortex. More brain is online, more of your mind is active in that higher analytical thinking way. So breathe before you start to write, okay? And stay as relaxed as you possibly can, focused, in a focused way. Okay, you can't be like, oh, right. But you're focused with intention, but not in that freak out mode. That's where your ideas are going to flow. Now, of course, that ideal total focused relaxation might not be possible during the test, but we're going to try our best, right? And then the other thing is I I see some students, they want to come up with the perfect answer and they want to come up with the perfect example. Don't aim for perfect. Okay, don't aim for an example that fits, makes sense, explains what I want it to say, it explains my point. It doesn't have to be genius. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to do its job. Okay. So there have been some times when I'm in a test situation, I write an essay and I don't really like it. I'm like, I don't even like the side I argued. Okay. I like the other side better. But it was just easier for me in that moment to write this and use this example. Okay. So don't aim for the perfect example, just aim for the example that's easiest for you to access in a short amount of time. Okay. Oh, what if I don't have any information about the topic? What are some of the tips you offer? So this is a great one. A lot of times when I'm asked like a businessy type of questions, I'm like, oh, I don't know anything about business. It's like a total turn off topic for me or whatever. Um, so in this situation, you really have to imagine. You have to use your imagination. Like, okay, I have no experience about this. I don't really like talking about it, but imagine if I am a business person. Imagine if I am this thing. And then what would be the situation? You really have to kind of create something and trust yourself. I mean, you are an observer of the world. You have enough knowledge to answer the question. That's just a fact. They're not going to ask you anything that's beyond your realm of answering. And even if I don't have direct experience with whatever the question is asking about, for example, let's say it's some sort of business question, which I hate answering, um, I know enough about, you know, the businesses around me or what I see in the world, or when I own a business, what would I imagine that to be like? Okay. So you have to really use your imagination. And unfortunately, in a lot of our schooling, they have not intentionally, but or maybe intentionally, I'm not sure. But basically what tends to happen in education, at least in my experience, is in the early years, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade, a lot of imagination is in the classroom. You're drawing, you're creating. I used to write books in second grade, and draw the pictures for my books. And there was a lot more time for that creative mind to play. And then at a certain point in our education, it's like, no, everything must be factual. Fact, 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 fact. Oh, I don't know about that. Therefore, I can't talk about it. I have no idea about those facts. So you have to kind of tap back into your power of imagination and creativity and trust that you can create an example. And it could be hypothetical, or you could just lie to me. Hey, I won't know. I'm very naive. If you create an example that's totally made up and you want to lie, if you write a beautiful example that works, I'm going to believe you. Okay. So be a little more creative, be playful if it's an area that you don't know about, and just trust in yourself that in that situation, you will have more than enough to talk about. Okay. All right. And we're coming up on just about, we've been going at it for an hour. So I want to take just a few more questions here. And I know there's so many Oh, I'll drop my link for the 4-week reading class. I'll just drop it in the feed so you'll have it. If you're interested, I do have spots. I want to keep the class pretty small, but I do have spots still left. So if you are interested. So I actually read academic English articles daily and 2 books in English per month. Wow, congratulations. That's why I'm feeling discombobulated since my score doesn't improve. It stays constant all the time. I would appreciate it if you could share your course link and even academic scientific article that you think recommend as well. As for the listening, I'm truly listening to English more than my own native language, but I believe I struggle with note taking and focus. What do you recommend here? Okay, so yeah, this is an example of now it's time to look at test strategy. So there's really like two things going on simultaneously. It's like reading and comprehending something, or listening and comprehending something, which it sounds like you're doing a great job at that. So what I'd recommend for you is to focus now on strategy. How do I answer this question in the shortest amount of time? The thing about TOEFL is you don't have to read every single word of the reading passage to answer the questions correctly. And there are just certain traps built in to the question that they're answers that make it look like, oh, that looks like a really good answer right there. But they're trying to trick you. Okay. So so you do have to really become familiar with strategies, how to get to the answer in the quickest amount of time, and how to avoid the typical TOEFL traps. So what I'd recommend for you, check out the free inference course that I have, and I'll drop that link below. Check that out, because that goes through a lot of the TOEFL traps. It focuses on the inference question, okay? But I want you to know that those traps can be applied to you'll see them in other questions. So when you do a practice test, I would get really, instead of reading daily articles, I would now focus on taking, doing at least a couple of practice tests. So maybe one day you do a reading practice test and the next day you do a listening practice test, and you kind of like alternate between those two as a study approach. And when you finish that practice test and you go back to look at the correct answers, okay, and you need a good quality book for this, okay, or the TPOs are good if you want to do something free, they're fair. If you want books, I go back to the official TOEFL IBT books. There's a red one and there's like a blue and yellow cover one. And I just got myself a brand new Cambridge because mine was falling apart because I used it all the time. I really like the Cambridge for reading and listening practice, because the readings tend to be a little bit more challenging. I just, if you're looking for a higher level challenge. So look at why. You have to ask yourself, why am I getting this wrong? Be curious. Why did I just get this wrong? And then, when I first started teaching TOEFL, I was doing the same thing. I was taking a test and be like, why did I get this question wrong? And then start to analyze. That's how you learn how the TOEFL works, when you start to ask, why did I get this wrong? Okay. So that's what I would recommend in your situation. Okay. And I will just wrap up with, Zaban TPOs a lot of students use them. I think they're a good free resource for us, right? Because they are recycled TOEFL tests, that have shown up previously. So they're fair. If you don't have anything else to access, I would use those for sure. And then, if you do want to buy a TOEFL book, I'd get one that has a CD-ROM, so you can, again, get that practice of taking the test on a computer screen type situation. Okay, so I'll just take this last question, which is if we have a high TOEFL score, how much does it help to enroll in university in Europe or USA? Okay, so I can only because I am in the US. I went to school in the US. So I grew up originally in Connecticut. I went to the University of Connecticut for my undergrad and my master's. And then for a brief time, I did graduate work at UCLA in California. So I can't speak, unfortunately, to schools in Canada or Australia or somewhere in Europe. It's a little bit different there, I think. So I'm only going to speak to when you apply to a school in the United States. When you apply to a school in the United States, what's important is a kind of whole package, okay? So this depends where you're going to apply. If you're going to apply to a very top ranked university, let's say like a Harvard or a Yale, um, or UC Berkeley, something like this. These are highly competitive schools. They have a lot of applicants. So yes, if you're applying to those schools, you're probably going to need a score of 100 or more on the TOEFL. Now, let's say you're applying to a school that's really good, but somewhere in the middle. You know, maybe they're not #1 or #2 university ranked, but they're somewhere in the middle. And by the way, these university rankings, if you're interested, US News and World Report, that usually puts out a ranking of schools. And they're also ranked by major, you know, by your field of study. So of course the tech schools, if you're interested in engineering, you know, those schools that are at the top are going to be different than the schools that are, let's say, #1 in sociology, something like that. Okay, so if you're applying to those highly competitive schools, then yes, a high TOEFL score is necessary. If you're applying to a school somewhere in the middle, this is where your whole package, and for a top school too, your whole package counts. And what I mean by whole package is your whole application. So yes, they're going to want to see TOEFL, but they're also going to want to see, you know, the SAT if you're applying as an undergrad. They're going to want to see the GRE or GMAT or, you know, LSAT if you're a lawyer. You can't forget the lawyers out there. But let's say you're applying to dentistry. I know some dentists needed the GRE. So they're going to want to see that score. They're going to want to see your GPA. So what is your grade point average? And for a lot of students, they have to convert, you know, because the US doesn't have the same system as other countries as far as your grades, right? So these grades will need to be converted to a scale that's equivalent to what we use so that your school can read your documents and understand what that means. So TOEFL score, any sort of other exam score, and GPA. Those are the numbers. But the school also wants to know who you are as an individual. Why do you want to go there? What can you contribute to the campus life there? What's unique about you? Why do you want to pursue what you want to pursue? Why do you want to go for this field of study? Other than monetary reasons. And this is when your personal essay comes into play, right? This is when your personal statement, is some people call it personal statement or statement of purpose. This is really important. I cannot stress how important this is. Do not have someone else write it for you. Have someone else edit and help you. But you are in charge here because this is your journey and your investment. So you really want to take your time with this essay because that is also a big factor when it comes to admissions to US schools. And I know for myself, I know for a fact that it wasn't necessarily my score, my GRE score, that got me into UCLA because my GRE score was just kind of so-so. It was like average, you know, maybe on the GRE is different than TOEFL, but I'd say on the TOEFL, it'd probably be like 80 points, 83. It was, it's not terrible. It's not like I got a 40, but it wasn't like I got 110 either, So I was kind of in the middle. And what was important was my personal statement. Because in that personal statement, I really explained, and this is more important for graduate school, okay? Less important for undergrad, but very important for graduate school. You have to know what it is you want to study and why. And when you explain that, bring that into the essay, if that corresponds to other people that are on that committee, basically in grad school, who is letting people into the department? It's the professors that are already in that department, because they're going to be your advisor, right? They're going to be overseeing your dissertation or your graduate work or whatever it is. So who do they want to work with? They obviously want to work with someone who has similar interests that they do, because even if you have a perfect score in TOEFL and a perfect score in your exam and a perfect grade point average of grades in school, but in your essay you're not a match for that school, or you don't have something there that they can actually help you with. So their field of expertise is something, but if you're not writing an essay that matches their field of expertise, then you don't really belong at that graduate school, right? There's nothing that they could do to help you get further in your studies. So that personal statement, that statement of purpose, is very, very important. So that's what I mean by having the whole package. Yes, the scores are important, but you want to make sure that your rest of the application is also really complete, really well done, and put together in a very professional, organized way. And make your personal statement stand out. Okay, you got to just make it unique. Show them why you're special and unique. And I know that's how I got into UCLA, because I had a personal statement that was a total match for this professor. And I wasn't actually even totally conscious of that when I was writing the essay. I knew a lot about the program in general, but not about this specific professor. And when she called me on the phone, she said, "Hey, congratulations, you're in the program." And when my name is such and such, and I went to look up her name and I read all of her interests, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, she's like my twin. We're interested in the same exact things." And so I knew that she connected with my essay. All right. It's a really important component. So I hope that answers your question. Yes, score is important, but so are the other things. And then the score will be important depending on what university you apply to. There'll be schools that will accept a lower TOEFL score. There are some schools that don't even need the TOEFL. Yeah. So you have to do research. Just research, what program you want, what schools will be a good match. And then in that list of schools, find like, okay, this might be a hard one for me to get into. This might be an easier one, middle, and then find the lower end where maybe, you just need 75 points on TOEFL and that's enough. Or maybe you don't even need the TOEFL and that's enough. All right. So there are schools out there that are like that. Okay. So I will say goodbye for now. It has been an honor and a pleasure to be here with you this morning. And I continue to just encourage you, wish you well, not only on the TOEFL, but just as a human being at this time, right? Continue to shine your light, your unique self. The world really needs it right now. We are in very, very interesting times. Just keep shining your light. Yeah, that's all for now. And I'll drop those links that we talked about right in our feed, okay? Be well, stay safe, and take care.